We turn now to a pretty awful story. A student expelled from a Christian school for wearing a rainbow sweater and eating a rainbow cake. That's apparently what's going on. And joining us now to break it down, Zeke Stokes, former vice president of GLAAD and LGBTQ rights leader. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much, John. Good to be with you.
Good to have you here. Story, I mean, it's the sort of story you wish you didn't have to cover, though. So tell us about this. I know that we're gonna show some pictures that apparently were an issue for the school, but is it really as simple as like a picture of a sweater and a cake? Can you really get thrown out of a school for that?
It seems to be that simple. You know, this is a 15-year-old student who was celebrating. Her mom posted a picture of the cake with a rainbow. She was wearing a rainbow sweater, and suddenly she was being expelled from this so-called Christian school in Kentucky. You know, can you imagine, John? You know, being so hateful, so fearful, your belief system so fragile that the rainbow on a cake or a sweater would be cause for undermining the school's atmosphere. I grew up in the rural South, in rural South Carolina, going to church every time the door was open. And so you got to get up pretty early to outsmart me as it relates to the Bible. And, it was actually a rainbow that God sent to Noah after the flood as a symbol that he would never destroy the earth with floods again if you follow those beliefs. And so, it's an outrageous story, but and it would be easy to sort of, I think, dismiss it as something that's a little bit of a fringe story or something out of the ordinary. But this is the kind of ideology that has a stranglehold on the right, on the Republican Party right now. And this is exactly the kind of thing they're trying to do with so-called religious freedom bills all across this country, to give people in the public space a license to discriminate based on so-called religious beliefs. We're seeing it right now in Tennessee, where there's a bill on the desk of the governor, the Republican governor there, that he has said he will sign, that allows adoption agencies to say it's against their religious beliefs to allow LGBTQ parents, otherwise loving and perfectly fit parents, to adopt. So this is a story that is a little bit silly on its face, but is really indicative of something that's very troubling going on across our country.
Yeah. Yeah, and we showed the pictures. When you look at the picture, it's like a 15-year-old girl who's smiling and she's happy. The cake looks delightful. I wish I could have some of it. It
looks delicious, and in fact, she doesn't even identify as LGBTQ herself. She just simply says she likes rainbows and colors and happy things. So does my 6-year-old niece. So I guess she would be subject to be expelled in this school too.
Yeah, and again, it's a symbol that has obviously been affiliated for a long time with the LGBTQ community, but it also occurs naturally in nature. Like, you can't cancel the sky. Like, having the right loves to claim that the left just gets triggered by unnecessary things, but they're freaking out over a cake and over a sweater. What they need, I think, like, I'm not a believer or anything, but like, they need a book that preaches like tolerance and acceptance and stuff. I wish that they had a book like that.
Well, the interesting thing is they do have that book. It's called the Bible.
You'd think
Jesus was a figure of acceptance and love, but somehow these folks keep dredging up things from the Old Testament that most theologians don't believe actually hold relevance today in that system of beliefs. But I want to point out, something else while we're on this subject, and that is that, there's a coordinated attack against LGBTQ people being led in state legislatures across this country, particularly LGBTQ youth, particularly trans youth. There are bills just filed the past week to 10 days or so, everywhere from Florida to South Dakota, a very coordinated effort to keep parents, to really intervene, to meddle in the medical decisions of parents who have transgender kids, and actually punish doctors, fine them, put them in jail for treating transgender kids medically under the recommendations of the American Association of Pediatrics. So this is something that is very real to this small group of people, but very real also in this political season that we find ourselves in, as candidates and parties are trying to find the next outrageous issue to get their base ginned up to turn out. This is, they've put LGBTQ youth in particular in the crosshairs.
Yeah, there's one other aspect of the story that I'd like, because we were talking about, like what if you had a book that could teach you how to act in this case? They seem to think that they did. So they apparently gave her a book called Gay Girl, Good God, written by someone who used to be gay and then had meetings with her to discuss this book. Is this acceptable? Is this appropriate for a school? Like, and as you point out, she doesn't even recognize, she doesn't identify as gay herself. So what is the goal there? What is the point of making a 15-year-old girl go through all this?
Well, I think what you're referencing is what would be called conversion therapy. This idea that somehow you can take someone who is LGBTQ and convert them into being something else. That's a practice that's been discredited by medical professions and psychologists and psychiatrists, and really is nothing more than child abuse by another name. But in fact, even yesterday, just yesterday in Utah, a very conservative state, based in very much in the Mormon philosophy of life and religious beliefs, banned conversion therapy for that very reason. But we see it practiced in settings like this, religious schools like this, because unfortunately they can get away with it because they are a religious institution.
Yeah, and you rightly point out that like we started off saying some people might see this as sort of a fringe story or out of the norm, but there are still we still have to fight these battles in many different states, and so it's not something that we can just like pretend has gone away or only affects a few people. It's still a very, very significant threat. Zeke Stokes, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, John.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.